Okay, we all know about the big budget AAA VR titles still to come in 2024. We know about the Batmans, the Behemoths, the Aliens and the Metros. But what about the unique new IP made by passionate indie developers that also deserves your attention? Well, today I'm rounding up a bunch of the best looking announced VR games dropping at some point in the future, sadly not necessarily 2024, that should be on your radar. First up is Memoriam, a brand new sci-fi horror game that I was lucky enough to go hands-on with at Gamescom, and let me tell you, this is very much my jam. Memoriam grabbed my attention immediately because of its huge Dead Space influences, from the audio to the creature design and even the dismemberment systems which are crucial in taking down the enemies that hunt you throughout the game. It's clear that the dev team are massive fans of the Dead Space series. There was also a lot of Doom 3 influence coming through during my demo, but this isn't just a Dead Space meets Doom in VR game. No, Memoriam definitely has its own identity and feels like a blend of the best elements of modern sci-fi horror games built from the ground up for VR. The team also seemed confident that the stuff I hadn't seen, especially the creatures I hadn't seen, were even cooler than the horrific enemies I faced in my short demo, so I can't wait to see what the full release, which is aiming for a proper, lengthy, single-player campaign, has in store for me. Now, I actually bought this next game on Steam when it released as a flat experience because I had hoped I'd be able to play it in VR using the UEVR mod. But then I discovered it wasn't built with the Unreal Engine and my dream died. But then my dream came back to life because it's now getting an official VR release. This is Pools VR, a liminal space walking simulator that's designed to make you feel slightly uncomfortable. Now, if you watch this trailer with audio, you might think it's a horror game. It sounds incredibly creepy, and it's filled with the kind of tension building that would lead you to believe there's a creature stalking you throughout this endless swimming pool complex. But as far as I understand, that's very much not the case. This is just a gorgeous looking, deeply uncomfortable liminal space that you have to navigate your way through. There are no monsters trying to eat you and nothing you need to run from. The monster is the environment itself, which has been designed to disturb you. I, for one, can't wait to explore this in VR. Up next, we have one of my most pleasant surprises from Gamescom, a game that charmed me and won me over immediately. This is Walltown Wonders, a brand new mixed reality experience from the team that created Hubris. Yeah, I know, right? This couldn't be any further from Hubris. Walltown Wonders is a magic little MR experience that has you building your own town into the walls of your physical house. You can choose where everything goes and the game will create bridges, tunnels and connections between the buildings as your town grows. But if you want to expand, you'll have to make your townsfolk work to gather materials and resources. Basically, it's a laid-back, mixed reality god sim with so much charm it's ridiculous. There were two moments in my Walltown Wonder demo that made me realise this was a special little game. Firstly, at one point one of my townsfolk asked me to let them get onto my hand and then pointed to where they wanted me to take them. This felt like genuine magic, like I was holding a real life borrower in my physical hand. And then secondly, at another point I was able to pilot around a mini airplane that I could freely manoeuvre around my environment. When I took the headset off at the end of my demo, the world around me looked dull without all the little buildings I'd created. This is a wonderful use of mixed reality. Ember Souls wants to be the VR Prince of Persia. It's a brand new action-adventure game where players can hack, slash and parkour their way through large environments, pulling off some maneuvers that have been pulled straight from the flat-screen Prince of Persia games. For example, you can jump to the large fabric banners hanging from the walls and slide down them to the floor, ultimately ripping the banner down the middle as you do it. You can also swing yourself from poles and fling yourself around by wall running in between bouts of sword and magic-based combat. It It all feels exactly like you'd expect a Prince of Persia VR game to feel. I went hands-on with the game at Gamescom and played for just under half an hour on the Quest 3. The game looked great and I could see exactly what they were trying to accomplish. For the most part, they're definitely on the right track, and players will no doubt love to jump into a game that tries to replicate the iconic movement systems and visual style of something as beloved as Prince of Persia in VR. But for me, the combat is where the game stumbles slightly at the moment. But don't worry, the devs do still have time to polish any rough edges, and I hope they do take that time to ensure the combat feels as impactful and smooth as possible. Because if they can get that right and eliminate the somewhat wonky, janky feeling of fighting an enemy, then they could have a huge hit on their hands with Ember Souls. I love board games, and up until recently when Magic the Gathering consumed my life, I used to play board games with a set group of friends every few weeks, and two of our favourite titles were Escape the Dark Castle and Binding of Isaac 4 Souls. So when I jumped into All On Board, the brand new VR board game platform, and saw that those two exact games have been recreated in virtual reality, complete with environments inspired by the source material, I knew these devs were onto something special. All On Board wants to be the digital platform for physical board games, and they're launching with a ton of officially licensed versions of real-world games that you can play in VR with your friends all over the world. Everything has been lovingly recreated in VR, but the team still want the experience to feel like a tactile board game, so grabbing and moving pieces, playing cards, and interacting with the boards themselves is all done physically, and hasn't been turned into a gamified auto-completing process. If you love board games and perhaps can't always get together with your group of friends physically, then All On Board could be the solution you've been looking for. When I first saw the trailer for Into Black, the newest VR game from the developers behind one of VR's best superhero experiences, Resist, I thought we were getting a No Man's Sky style space exploration simulator for the Quest. But the more I looked at it, the more I realised this is actually much closer to something like Deep Rock Galactic, an action-adventure game that sets you loose across 20 plus levels either solo or with up to 3 friends, and tasks you with mining for resources, gathering treasure, navigating underground cave systems, and ultimately fighting off horrible alien foes before you need to repair your ship and get the hell out of there. It really does look like a native standalone Deep Rock Galactic without the space dwarves, and honestly, I'm here for it. The game contains a fully fleshed out campaign that can be played entirely solo or in co-op. There's a PvPvE mode that pits you up against 11 other players in a race to grab as much loot as you can carry, and the whole thing is wrapped in a lovely looking stylized visual aesthetic. Binary Mill know how to make a great VR game, and Resist remains one of the best VR superhero games we've got, despite the open world feeling pretty empty a lot of the time. So I'm excited to see them take on a brand new genre and a very different style of VR game. Here's me always wanting a VR Dead Space game, and now all of a sudden we have two brand new games that were clearly heavily inspired by Dead Space in the same video. This next one is By Grit Alone, and if this one feels even more Dead Spacey, then that's probably due to the fact that one of the writers of this game worked on the original Dead Space. The writing team also consists of people who worked on Doctor Who, Judge Dredd, and Resident Evil Village, so at the very least we should expect a strong story with this one. By Grit Alone is another sci-fi horror shooter coming to the Quest that throws players into a futuristic space station setting filled with horrific alien creatures and humanoid monstrosities. However, this game does opt for a more retro-inspired boomer shooter aesthetic, so it will likely need to rely on tension building within the atmosphere, music, and pacing to craft its scares, as so far I haven't really seen any creature designs that would be able to truly spook me. Well, the spider creatures might get to me actually. Even the most simplistic looking VR spiders still freak me out. They're just grim. Realistic ones, cartoony ones, colourful ones, dull ones. They're all horrible, and I'll happily blast them into dust with whatever gun I am provided. Do you remember those old choose your own adventure storybooks? The ones where you would get to the end of a page and then have to make a decision that impacted which page you went to next. And then that in turn ultimately impacted the overall story and ending. Yeah, I used to love those. I had a bunch of the Goosebumps ones, and just talking about them now has me wanting to seek out some newer versions. What a brilliant concept. Well, One True Path is a brand new game from Inner Space VR that seems to draw inspiration from these choose your own adventure style books, and the two teasers we've had so far seem to hint at two radically different locations, settings and stories for this new VR game. The first teaser seems to be taking place in a Western style setting, whilst the narrator speaks about players not wanting another boring old first person shooter, whilst the second teaser jumps into a sci-fi setting where players are using telekinesis to solve puzzles and take down enemies. At this stage, it's unclear exactly what One True Path is, but these cryptic teasers are building my curiosity, and more are promised to drop over the next few weeks. Fingers crossed we learn more soon, because a genre-hopping choose-your-own adventure in VR could be fantastic, but I might be massively off base with that guess. Another great use of mixed reality up next, this is Last Stand, a brand new game from the team that gave us Drop Dead the Cabin and Home Invasion. Now this time around, you're not only defending your physical space from invading zombies, but you're also engaged in a high intensity shootout with another human controlled player. Or up to 3 other human controlled players, I believe. This is the first location based multiplayer mixed reality experience I've ever seen. Each player plays the game in their own physical environment, and whilst in game they will see enemy players who are also playing in their own physical environments, hiding behind their own physical sofa and shooting at you as you hide behind your own physical bookcase. The magic that Soul Assembly have had to conjure here to get this to work is baffling to me, but inside the headset, the game essentially looks like it's taking place inside a shopping mall where you have taken cover in one of the shops, and then across the concourse you'll see other shop fronts where other players have taken cover, and the objective is to take them down whilst also defending your shop from zombies. It's chaotic, it's clever, and it's another wonderful showcase for mixed reality that I didn't know I needed. I'm always talking about how one of VR's best traits is its ability to play with size, scale and perspective. The medium is amazing when it comes to making players feel tiny one minute and giant the next, so I'm really excited to see Metamorphosis coming to Quest this October. Now Metamorphosis originally launched as a flat screen game 4 years ago, and I very nearly purchased it when it came out then, but the concept and setting is so perfectly suited for virtual reality that I'm really glad I didn't play it previously. In the game, you play as a travelling salesman who is transformed into a tiny cockroach and who must embark on an adventure throughout these now gigantic locations in search of those who can turn you back into human form. With a fully voiced cast of colourful human and bug characters, this adventure looks like it could be particularly memorable in virtual reality, and I love the idea of traversing across regular old household items and settings as a tiny little bug in VR. That kind of stuff just works so well, and if done correctly can be genuinely awe-inspiring inside the headset. We don't have long to wait to find out though, as Metamorphosis launches in just over a month. Human Fall Flat is probably the last game I would have expected to get a VR port, but here we are. Human Fall Flat VR is officially happening, and I can't wait to see how they handle the trademark wonky, wobbly platforming control scheme in virtual reality. Now originally I thought we might be getting a first person perspective version of Human Fall Flat in VR, but reports have now surfaced that this VR port is still a third person experience, and you actually have to physically puppet your characters through the levels using your touch controllers in the same way you'd move a marionette around in the real world. Think Pinocchio with all his strings attached. We'll essentially be puppeting our characters like that, which I think could work really well when it comes to replicating the wacky, chaotic platforming action that the Flat game is so well known for. And finally, a PSVR2 game that is launching in just a few days now, and also one of the very best VR survival games made to date. This is of course Into the Radius. Now I'm sure most of you have already gone hands-on with this fantastic game, either on PCVR or Quest, so I won't waffle on about it for too long. But for those of you who haven't played this, Well, you really should fix that, because it is an incredibly addictive survival sim that gives players all the tools and freedom to play however they want to. If you want to meticulously plan each and every excursion into the dangerous outside world, then you can. If you just want to tackle story-driven missions, then you can. If you want to play it like a true sim and spend days exploring every inch of the world, then you can. And if you want to create the perfect hoarders stockpile of guns, ammo, food, upgrades and items, then you can do that too. That's actually one of the best things you can do in Into the Radius. I love creating a space for all the items I find on my missions and then organising it all into perfect matching piles. Into the Radius is a nerve-wracking survival sim that will appeal to players who want as much immersion as they can possibly get, right down to needing to maintain their guns by cleaning the barrel and polishing the stock. Because if you don't, the gun could jam at the most inopportune moment. PSVR players are going to love this. And that's everything for today's video. Let me know down in the comments if you'll be picking up any of these titles over the next few months, or if you're just saving your pennies for the big 4 that are releasing before Christmas. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like, leave a comment, hit subscribe, and all that good stuff. I'll see you soon for another one. Take care.